learned a lot, and we think we can share a little bit from what we have learned. I don't know, I want to make a suggestion because we have only one screen, whether it would be okay for members of the high table to temporarily move so that they can see. A lot of what I'm going to say is tutorial, which is for the future. So that's a good slogan. And I'm sure you will even view, you're building not just for the future, but you're building for now, and you're building even for the people that will man the oil industry in this country. I will just move straight then. Okay, I have about 50 slides, but I'm sure we'll make it in 1 hour. We are an academic institution, and I want to touch on so many areas. Is that okay? Okay, good. Now, the outline of what I'm going to say is over there. I will briefly make an introduction, and then we'll look at the role of academia in the Ugandan oil and gas industry, as well as we look at the challenge of which is common to all of Africa in harnessing her natural resources, and we'll draw conclusions. Can you hear me well? Is that loud enough? Okay. Now, regardless of what they think about the oil will continue to be a vital source of energy in the global economy for decades to come. People may say that, well, oil will finish in 20 years, in 50 years. I don't believe that. Oil will continue to be with us for a long time. We'll also look at what are the key features of the oil and gas industry. By the way, I will use oil and gas interchangeably. They mean the same thing for the purpose of this presentation. And then we'll look at some of the key operations that take place in the oil and gas industry. And then we'll look at what confers rights for a company to exploit oil in a given territory. So that's the background to the introduction. Now you have there the cover design for Time magazine for August in 2007. In that article you could see that you have a block of ice and you have 4 flags there. One is Norwegian, the other one is Danish, the other one is Russian, the other one is the US. And then to the right is the climatic condition of the Arctic over several years. I wouldn't go into detail, but suffice it to say the top one, can you see the mark there? That was the area covered by the Arctic in 1982. And then in 2005, can you see that area has shrunken because of global warming? And now that has further reduced. And yet on top of that, Russia have sent a submarine as far back as 2007 to plant a flag on the seabed underneath the ice because they are colonizing that. Why are people scrambling for that? Because there is lots of oil locked under the Arctic. Now, you have a picture there of the then Russian President Putin. They asked him, Russia has planted a flag underneath the Arctic. Is Russia claiming territory of the Arctic? He responded with a rhetorical question, that America planted a flag on the moon. Does that make the moon America's? Now the reason I show this is to tell you that if people will go to this land to look for oil, now coming to look for oil in the Albertine Lake is a small price to pay. So going to the coast of Kenya and the whole of the coast that surround Africa, right into the deep waters, to look for oil is still a cheaper undertaking compared to going to look for oil under the Arctic. But they're doing it. Now, what are the common features in the oil industry? Some of them are listed here. The investments are very risky because somebody could put their money looking for oil and they don't find the oil. It is capital intensive. So even prospecting alone, you're talking of millions of dollars before you go into drilling, and before the oil comes up to the surface, you're talking of hundreds of millions of dollars, in some cases even billions of dollars. The people that invest in the oil and gas must be patient, because it could take up to 5 years for them to begin to recover their money. It's important we understand this, because otherwise we see when the oil starts coming, people will be questioning, well, where is the money? Okay? The industry is an integrated one, and it's technically complex, meaning everyone and every process is dependent on another one. If one gets it wrong, then it will go down the line, and it will affect the whole operation. I have put there that the core technology of oil and gas is foreign to Africa, but we can acquire that technology. Unfortunately, when you are investing in oil and gas, the investments are not sensitive to oil prices. What does that mean? Uganda is contemplating a pipeline, or building a refinery, or both. If that refinery breaks down, and you require, say, $500 million to put that refinery in order, the price of oil could have dropped maybe from about $100 now to $50. Now the cost of repairing that refinery doesn't change. So that's why we are saying the investment is independent of the price of crude. Now, Dr. John and many of you, especially the students of oil and gas, some of what I'm going to say may not be new, but it's important so that we establish a sound background in understanding. Well, essentially, you have some of these operations in oil and gas. So they look for the oil, you call that prospecting, and then they drill for the oil, then they complete the well. Completing the well means you're making that well safe so that the oil will come out safely. If you don't complete the well properly, then you could have problems. You could have disasters similar to the one that happened in the US 2 years ago. And then you have to produce that oil and process it. So the oil will come with some impurities, including water. So that has to be processed so that the product you're getting is sellable. It can be fit for refining. And then you store that, you transport that, you refine, and then you distribute. All of these are represented by that diagram. You can produce oil in the sea, in a lake, such as the one you have. You can produce oil on land, even in the desert. You can get oil there. And these are the processes. So you have a drilling platform here, and then if this production is below the water, say in the lake. So in this particular example, we are looking at a situation whereby you're producing oil under the seabed, and seabed could be your lake. So these are wells they have drilled, and they are sitting on the seabed, and these different wells are connected by pipelines, just like you would do on the surface. And then you bring them up to a big ship. We call this a floating storage, a floating production and storage, as well as offloading. So this is a mini factory there. All these wells produce the oil, and they are channeled here. The oil is processed and stored in the ballast of the ship, and then a tanker will come and it's offloaded from here. So this is called an FPSO, floating production, storage, and offloading. And these are the processes we talk about. Now, this is a diagram showing the same FPSO here, and then you have a loading tanker coming behind, and that tanker is taking the crude from the FPSO for export. Now, those are a summary of oil operations, which you can find in textbooks, so nothing special about them. Now, what we want to touch on here is the various approaches that are involved globally in exploiting oil. So, for example, perhaps James Kisale would say, well, I have money to invest in oil activities in the Albertine Lake. Now, he wouldn't just go there and start to look for oil. He will have to get permit from the government. Now, these are the various permits that people can get in looking for oil. You have concessions, you have production sharing agreements, sometimes they are called production sharing contracts. You have joint ventures, you have service agreements. Now, it's important for us to understand this because failing to understand this is giving room to a cloud of confusion. And people think government is making money, government is doing the wrong thing, and so on and so forth. Now, we'll quickly go over this. What is a concession? It simply says somebody has money they want to invest, and they approach government to say, we want to invest in this particular block. In order to get their commitment, government will say, okay, you pay for a signature money, a signature bonus. So they pay this money, it could be a few $1 million. But government will say, well, all the risks associated with drilling for this oil, we bear it. We have nothing at all in this. If you discover oil, then that's good. If you don't discover oil, we will not pay for anything. So if you discover oil, though, then you will begin to produce and pay us taxes and royalties. And so this is an exclusive license, as it's noted there. The company assumes all the risks and costs associated with the above. The license fee is often paid. We call that signature bonus. The fiscal arrangements are dependent on the country. So it depends on how this country arranges a company that are granted or is granted a concession. But the ownership of the oil inside the hole belongs to the country until that oil comes to the surface before it becomes the property of the investing company. Now, the concession is useful when you don't have money to put on the ground, on the table. So this is probably what happened when companies like Heritage Oil first explored for oil. Because perhaps the government did not have the millions of dollars required to invest, and therefore you are given a concession. So because it's a risky business, if you're lucky to get oil, well, you could strike it rich. But again, all of it depends on the contractual terms the government and the company undertake. The second one is the production sharing agreement. Now, it's similar to the concession, but with a slightly different angle, and it tends to be more favorable than to the country. Essentially, it says a company enters into an agreement with the country, the sharing, what we call the production sharing agreement. The company invests their money and produce the oil. When the oil comes on surface, then under a contractual agreement, there is a sharing formula whereby the government says, well, we will take part of this and you will be taking more over so that you recover your costs, and over time we will be gaining and you will be losing. Over maybe 5 years or however long it takes you to recover your money. And then once you recover your money, then the formula changes. Then government starts to get more and more. It's important we understand this so that when the oil starts coming, people may not see the effect yet because government has not put their money there. The companies that have put their money will have to recover that money. As somebody, an outsider, speaking dispassionately, I think it's important we understand. Otherwise, when the oil starts coming, people after 6 months will ask the government, well, where is the money? So, but this is how it works. Now again, until that oil comes to the surface, all the oil belongs to the nation. Yes. I should also point out that regardless of who invests in the oil, the physical structures, so the wellheads, everything, at the termination of the contract belongs to the nation. So if, for example, Tolo Oil terminate their contract, they wouldn't go and pull out their wellheads. No, all those assets belong to the nation. That's normally how some of these contracts are structured. You have a joint venture. The joint venture says, well, we don't want somebody to take almost 100% ownership of our oil. So we have money, we want to put part of that money. And we enter into a venture maybe as a nation we can afford to put 60%, 50%, whatever. And then we bring in a group of external investors and they take the remaining share. And then both parties contribute money in proportion to their stakeholding. And that money is used to develop the fuel, produce the oil, and as the oil comes, if it is 100 barrels per day, and if Uganda has contributed 60%, so they take 60 barrels, and then the other parties take 40 barrels. So that is how it works. Initially, if you don't have the technology, then the other party, often the multinational companies, will operate the venture on your behalf. And then with time, as you develop capacity, then you take over the operation of the venture. Now, a service agreement, which is probably the best, but it's the most expensive, is to say, well, we Ugandans, we have lots of money. We don't want anybody to come and interfere with our oil. What we will do, we don't have the technology. Therefore, we invite different companies. It could be Toro, it could be Total, it could be ExxonMobil, it could be Shell. And we say, we want to develop this fuel. We know approximately how much oil is there. We want to develop so that we produce 100,000 barrels per day. You give us quotations separately. So you bid for the development of this fuel. We will pay you for that service. As soon as the oil comes, you have no right to even a single drop of that oil. So we sell that oil and we make the money. Now this is the best, but it's only when you have the money. Very few countries in the world have that capability. Maybe countries of the Middle East that have lots of money. But that doesn't mean Uganda may not get to this stage with time. So if money keeps coming and it's conserved, then you may get to a point whereby you are able to afford a joint venture or a service agreement. Is that clear? Because these are fundamental things. If people understand this, then they will understand when the money starts coming, and they will also understand when to hold government accountable. Otherwise, unknowingly, they may think, oh, well, government is failing to deliver the dividends of the oil industry, whereas the money is not there yet. It takes time. Now, come to the theme of our discussion. Well, this is the Albertine area and various blocks that have been delineated, and some of them have been assigned or allocated. Now, but we'll look at the role of academia in two areas: strategy, human resources, and R&D. I'll move a bit quicker now. Now, it's important, in my view, that academia exercise influence in this area. I dare to say that in developed nations, academic institutions like this university should be the thinking machine for the country. The politicians are doing their own thinking, but you can imagine they have all kinds of things to deal with. So the institutions like your university should be the thinking machine for this country. They need to ask hard questions. Where would Uganda, or where do we want Uganda to be in the next 50 years? Which is similar to what INT trains their people. So we need to ask ourselves hard questions. Where will Uganda be in the next 50 years? If we know where we want to take Uganda, then we can then formulate goals and say, in 10 years we hope to have reached this particular stage, and then 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and so on. Before we can think of how we'll get there, we need to find out where are we? What are the resources that we need to take Uganda to in the next 50 years? The politicians don't have time to think for this. So you, the academia, have the responsibility for thinking. David and myself, we live in the UK. We see government regimes come and go, but nothing changes in society. Policies don't change. The reason that is the case is because they have institutions that do the thinking. Policy planning, they look ahead, they look sideways. China is growing. How will the impact of China growing affect the UK? And those institutions are the University of Cambridge and the University of Oxford. These are people that are silently thinking and shaping the direction of the nation. They are not political, they don't care who is in power. Their focus is to think for the country for the best interest of the country. Not just Uganda, Africa and African nations have to adopt that. The thinking should not be left to politicians alone. We should get to a point whereby, as academia, politicians will come to us and ask, well, what is happening globally? The events that are happening globally, what do you think, how do you think they will impact us here now and 5 years to 10 years time? And so we should be really thinking and shaping the direction of the country and therefore of the continent. Also, we need to mention at this point that Africa's problems are similar. If you can deal with the problems in one country, then you have a model to solve the problem in other countries. So when I'm talking to you here in Uganda, for me the message is the whole. Now, in terms of human resource development, you need to identify what the needs are in the industry. Also understand the dynamics of human resources in the oil and gas industry. What are the strategic linkages between HR needs and those dynamics? And then we develop strategies in ensuring that you are developing the right human resources that are desirous in Uganda. And above all, I started by saying, where do we want Uganda to be in the next 50 years? So we have, at every point of our thinking, we should align our HR developmental goals as indeed every other goal. We have to align them to where we want the country to be in future. Now, I've talked that oil and gas HR is more than four. The industry is probably the only industry you will find all kinds of people. Regardless of your initial training, you will find people there. That doesn't mean we don't need experts that are trained in geology, in oil and gas. I will come to that. So you will find that you will have historians there, economists there, HR people there, scientists there, engineers there, all of them. Whatever your background, you can have a role if you are adaptable. Say, for example, if somebody has already graduated, say in economics, they may think, oh, well, I can't fit into the oil and gas. No, you can. Yes, you can. If you're smart and enterprising, because it's about making money. So our thinking should always be, is this cost effective? Will it bring good returns? So that is the thinking in the industry. You have to be willing to learn and you have to be a team player. We started by saying it's an integrated industry. If a linkage is broken, it will affect every other thing down the line. There's no retirement age in the oil and gas industry. Absolutely, there's no retirement age. The more you experience, the bigger your price tag. So, the industry pays for your skills, not so much your qualification. So, as we are training people to take up roles in the oil and gas, they must understand that when they go there, they wouldn't go and brag to say, well, I've got a Bachelor of Engineering in Petroleum Engineering from the best university in Eastern Africa or maybe in Africa. Therefore, I have to be this. And maybe you have somebody with a HND that has 10, 15 years experience. He will teach you the job. As far as the company is concerned, that person is already earning money for them. It's more useful. So you better condescend yourself and learn from them and also grow in the process. Now, so I mentioned that all disciplines, you find them in the oil and gas industry. So these are the traditional disciplines you get. So you have the science and engineering related, you have the humanities and others. So you'll find them here. But with what we have seen, what are the implications for an institution like the University of Nigeria? So we should emphasize translating principles and concepts into skills, because we should not produce graduates that only remember. They can tell us answering a question and so on. So what? How do you translate that into reality? So our training, not just because we are targeting the oil and gas industry, but we should aim at producing people that can translate those principles into skills. That is key. That is what will make us and make Africans competitive in the global market. Now we said, regardless of your discipline, so if you're already in the oil and gas industry, there are things that are helpful for you to learn on your own, or you're preparing to go into that area to understand. You have to have an appreciation for economics. And I dare to say African pounds and pennies. So we need to have an appreciation of economics. Some of us who started in sciences wish we had taken economics, but we end up learning these things often the hard way in order to fit in. We should have appreciation for entrepreneurial skills, because the whole industry is about making money and profit. So people need to understand how entrepreneurship works. HSC, health, safety and environment. We have to be able to work as a team, so team play. And then communication skill. It's important we speak clearly, we give instructions clearly, because if the instructions are misinterpreted, somebody, instead of going to switch on the button, they switch it off. Or instead of leaving it on, they go and switch it on. And then it causes catastrophe. Now, the slogan of the University of Makerere says, we build for the future. So how do we build human capital for now and for the future? Now, fortunately, you already have a department that is training graduates or young Ugandans in the area of oil and gas. Now, as you can see, this is what a typical postgraduate program in oil and gas is. So it's quite a detailed area. So you have reservoir engineering. These are the people that study and tell you how much oil is on the ground. You have drilling and well engineering. So the people that, after the reservoir engineers have confirmed that we think we have so much oil is sitting there, they then go and drill and then produce the oil. And then you have the completion. You have oil and gas engineering as a general topic. This is often useful for people that are whose initial areas are not oil and gas. So the engineers, scientists, they want to branch out into the oil and gas engineering, so they can well easily take an MSc program in oil and gas. And then you have production engineering, subsea engineering. This is the key problem we have in Africa, and we'll see subsea well intervention. So if you have a problem down on the seabed, how do you deal with that problem? So, and then well design and all kinds of other facets. Dr. John will very well be familiar with this. So these are typically postgraduate courses. So if your university is planning to set up postgraduate courses, these are areas you need to be thinking of. Of course, you have things like petroleum economics, petroleum law, and other things. So we'll move quickly. Now, how does academia fit into this? Well, my view is that we should have an integrated Institute of Petroleum Studies. That could be part of the university. It could be separate. But it makes sense to be part of a university, even if physically it's sitting somewhere, so that you have shared resources. So that if somebody is talking, if you're teaching people about petroleum law, that institute wouldn't need to employ a separate professor or lecturers in that area. You most likely already have a law department in this university. So you can then bring in lecturers from the law department. So shared resources makes it cheaper, so that whatever investment government is putting into that institute is spread and goes around. And then it allows the university to expand within rather than without. Now, we're saying when you're developing, train people at all levels. So you have need for technicians, you have need for supervisors, and then you have need for people with high-tech knowledge. So people that are trained professionally in the area of oil and gas, as we saw in the previous slide. And then establish strategic linkages with other institutions, whether within Africa and outside Africa, preferably both. I lecture in one of the universities in Nigeria. It's called Institute for Petroleum Studies. Nigeria has many universities, and at least 15 to 20 of them offer undergraduate and postgraduate studies in oil and gas. On top of that, the government found it necessary to set up an institute. So that's where I visit as I go there as a visiting lecturer. Now, the characteristic of that institute is that almost all the lecturers are people with both academic and industry experience. So they come from all over the world. And we could go there and spend a month. And the admission pattern is very demanding. So Nigeria, with a population of 160 million people, this institute, a particular class is not more than 30. So it's very competitive. They set very stringent exam requirements and only those that pass. So there is no sentiment, there is no nepotism to say, well, I have this person who will help me. No, it's purely on merit. And even with nearly 60 years experience in producing oil and gas and training people, Nigeria still sees the need to produce these high caliber people, because we have to continue to develop ourselves. We have to gradually take over the running of the operations of the oil and gas in our continent. So, like I said, we're saying undertake postgraduate programs. Again, you can link with other universities. So you don't need to invent the wheel. As an institution, a famous institution for that matter, you can link with other universities and they will be sympathetic and then assist you, either by sending visiting professors in the first instance to help you build capacity and so on. Don't look at the Ugandan market alone. Don't look at the East African market alone. Look at the world as the market for the products you're producing. And those products are the students you're graduating. So that should be our thinking. Think globally, not just locally. Now, I'm going to show you a case history to emphasize the need why Africa is paying a price for not developing technically. The case study is about a field, the first deep water project undertaken in Nigeria called the Bonga West. I hope we can learn from this, and it's not about saying, well, how could this be? Because the problem cuts across the whole continent. Bonga West, so this is the southern part of Nigeria, this is the Delta region. So this is the ocean, Atlantic Ocean, so the territory belonging to Nigeria. So Bonga West is located on Block 212. It's about 120 kilometers offshore of Lagos. The license is for oil production lease 212. It was the first deep water licensing plan in Nigeria. That was as far back as 1992. It's sitting at a water depth a little over 1,000 meters. So can you imagine we're sitting on a water depth that's more than a kilometer? It occupies an area of 60 square kilometers. It has recoverable reserves of between 600 million barrels to 1.2 billion. It's operated under a JV. It cost $3.5 billion. So of that cost, Nigerian government paid 60%. And then the other partners, which involve many oil companies. Now this is it on the continental map. And this is the FPSO. And these are the various wells. Now, this particular Bonga Southwest actually is sitting at 1.2 kilometers. So the total well depth was more than 4 kilometers. So Professor was talking of, yes. So what you do, as you can see, the same pipe, it takes 1.2 kilometers to get to the surface of the bottom of the sea. And then you drill in there, and then you turn and drill horizontally so that the total depth was about 4 kilometers. It's a lot. Now, I'm beginning to come to where this should cause us to think as Africans. This ship, I have been there 3 times. It's a massive, massive facility. This is the total weight of that FPSO. 300,000 metric tons. A metric ton is 1,000 kilograms. the top side, that is the factory we built on top to process the food, was 17,000 metric tons. Now bear in mind, the steel used to produce this was not sourced from Africa because we don't have an iron and steel complex. What is she? Imagine importing 317,000 metric tons of steel from a continent that has lots of iron ores spread across the whole continent. And these are the wells, the different wells. It has a production capacity of about 200,000 barrels a day. Quite a lot. The last time I was there, they were actually about 230. And it's producing about 150 million standard cubic feet of gas per day. So you have 29 subsidiaries, so the well beds, 29 of them. The pipelines, you have 36 kilometers of 10-inch production flow line, and then 92 kilometers of 16-inch gas export line, and then 25 kilometers of 12-inch water injection line, because you inject water to force the oil to come out so that you can produce that much. Now, so everything you have slightly surveyed, million FPS of fabrication was first, the fabrication was first done in South Korea, and then they moved it to England, where they completed it, and then it was tied to the seacoast and positioned, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the machines. So this is, for example, machine for laying pipelines. This is the FPSO in South Korea when it was being constructed. This is it now being towed to Nigeria at that time. It looks small here, but this is several football pitches. Now, the question is, this project cost $3.5 billion. How much of that money remained in Africa? And bearing in mind that one African country contributed 60% of that. Now this is where the money went. We've seen 317,000 metric tons of steel. It was not imported from Africa to South Korea to make it. So it came from South Korea. All the pipelines we're talking about, we don't make them in Africa. And we have things like this subsea wellheads and pipelines. This is the subsea pipeline laying ship actually. These pipelines, you see them rigid, but actually they can coil them. So when this ship is traveling, it's uncoiling them and then dropping them on seabed. That project had 23 suppliers. And the suppliers came from Europe and the USA. So part of that money went to South Korea, part of the money went to Europe, and part of it went to the US. When will we be able to do these things? But the future starts today. The sooner we begin to train our young people, then maybe 50 years down the line, we'll be able to make this and export. This is a common trait in all of the African countries, perhaps with the exception of South Africa. So, what are the conclusions we can draw from these cases? Africa did not and has not adequately prepared technologically to effectively exploit and harness our hydrocarbon resources to the fullest benefit of our citizens. Let me pause. If that JV was done here in Uganda, and Ugandan government contributed 60% of 3.5 billion, people will be screaming now, where is our money? That is even a JV. So if this was a concession, how long will it take for them to recover their money? So we could wait for years, and then the ordinary citizens will be saying, "Oh well, what the government do? We are not seeing the benefits of the oil. These things cost money." The prognosis will likely remain bleak unless immediate and deliberate and concerted efforts are taken. What are such steps? I'm nearly there, don't worry. The problem is that we have to move away from intellectual dependence to independence. What do I mean? This is my theory. First of all, we need to aim at adding maximum value to our oil and gas resources. Thankfully, Uganda will build a refinery. But if it is possible, you go beyond a refinery and incorporate a petrochemical plant. A refinery alone will not solve the problem. It will meet your requirements of petrol, but in terms of really adding value, it will not. For example, the crude you have in Uganda is heavy. That's actually ideal for refinery, for petrochemical. In Nigeria, we had a petrochemical plant because Nigeria's oil is light, so it's good for petrol. We have to be importing heavy oil from Venezuela to feed that petrochemical plant. Now here is Uganda with heavy oil. So it makes sense to incorporate a petrochemical plant. With refining alone, you may be able to get 10 products. With petrochemicals, you could get 100 products, 200 products, as much as you want, depending on what you decide you want and how you design that petrochemical plant. Okay, it is expensive, but this is something to consider. Capacity building. Many Africans in critical areas of oil and gas, particularly in the area of subsea engineering. So you saw those pipelines sitting on the seabed. Those are subsea. Anything below the water, we call it subsea. Africans don't have that technology. So when will we get it? Until we have it, then we'll have to be dependent on the Mozambos to come and do this for us at whatever price they charge us. We also have to identify any loopholes that could be used to unduly skew the benefit that will come from the oil and gas. And there has to be prudent financial management. The money that is coming, there has to be a deliberate approach to target the money on investments that add value. And part of that investment is developing capacity, building capacity, such as universities. Now, some years ago, about 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, I came up with this concept because I was baffled. Why are we where we are in Africa? So, I came with the understanding that we have it possibly a misunderstanding of what constitutes science, engineering, and technology. So, I have defined science as understanding of the fundamental laws and principles governing nature, matter, and energy, and their interactions. Now, engineers move further, they take these concepts and then design and fabricate processes and operations, often on a commercial scale. But that does not make us technically viable. We have to structurally apply those scientific and engineering principles to harness resources on a commercial and profitable scale. So, whereas you can learn science and engineering, you can only acquire or develop your own technology. It's important we understand that. You cannot teach technology, you have to acquire it. And how you acquire it is entirely up to you. Yeah. The Japanese took the route of emulation, meaning they wanted this, they buy it, they break it down and study it and see how they can replicate it. So I've come up with this Venn diagram where you have science here. Science deals with questions such as why. Why does this happen? Engineering deals with questions how. How do we make this? And then you have skills, which is practical application of all of this, which constitutes, in combination with science and engineering, allows us to. So you have technology at the center. So if we combine science and engineering, we call that applied science or applied engineering. If we combine, okay, sorry. Okay. If we combine engineering with skills, we get a skill engineer. If we combine science with skill, we get a skill scientist. If we combine engineering with science, we get an applied scientist. Now, for us to be able to to be technically advanced, we need to combine all of these skills to arrive at what I call technology at the center of that Venn diagram. And so, yeah. So, I've said here, failure to understand the limits of science and engineering is partly responsible for the underdevelopment of Africa industrially. Often we think that an engineer or scientist without skills can solve all engineering or scientific problems. If that was the case, then if I'm an engineer, I wouldn't take my car to the roadside mechanic to repair for me. You can teach knowledge, but you cannot teach experience. That's exactly why history repeats itself. So, what do we do? Throughout societies, whatever the religious beliefs of that society, science and technology are a common denominator. Science in Uganda is the same as in Kenya, is the same as in the UK, is the same as in Asia. It doesn't change. So, this science and technology are common denominators. It is therefore science. When we talk of science and technology, of course, it means we're including engineering. These are prerequisites for the emancipation and development of any nation. Therefore, if we are undertaking research in areas of science, engineering, and technology, it should be something of a matter of course, not something that is unique. So Africa should get to a point whereby we are making deliberate efforts to enshrine this in all areas, which is what we have said here. Now, again, some lessons as we look back on the case of the Bonga. Africa should embark on an aggressive, broad-based technological development with each nation or region focusing on how best to harness their human and natural resources. African nations should set up comprehensive universities of technology equipped to churn out graduates trained in technology emulation. How do we copy technology? Countries without experience in hydrocarbon exploration and exploitation should learn from the mistakes of, as well as benefit from the experience of those with the experience. Local content policy should be enshrined in all aspects of hydrocarbon exploration and exploitation, backed by the necessary legal instruments to enforce those policies. And we should aim at adding maximum value to our oil and gas resources. And I'll be quick on this. Your oil industry is unique because you see, you have what you call your fields multi-splatter. So the area may be small, but you see you have different layers of oil in most of your fields. So that is good. It means like you have different beds. In one location, you can have up to 3 beds or layers of oil. So that is a huge benefit. It means even in a small area you can get a lot of 5%, 40%. Your crude is waxy, but that's why you need to consider the case of a petrochemical plant. Your country is landlocked. So are you wanting to export? How much will it cost you to export? So that's the more reason why you need a refinery. And preferably, in my opinion, to also include a petrochemical plant. You are also blessed with other resources. We use caustic soda in making our soaps. You know where that caustic soda is coming from? It's coming from salt. And as far back as 2008, when I first visited here, I'm told you have a lot of salt in this country. So I'll show you how we can combine that salt with the petrochemical plant, and you will produce literally hundreds of products. It's possible. Now, you're going for a refinery. That's fine. You'll get this from that refinery. So how many? Maybe about 10 of products. So because your crude is waxy, so you get asphalt there. So you'll be able to make good roads. You can export that asphalt to other nations and so on. So, but you can have plastics, sorry, petrochemicals, and whereby. Now, if you look through the window there, can you see the drainage pipe there? They are just at the edge of the building. That's made of plastic. It's what we call PVC, polyvinyl chloride. Now imagine if you had a petrochemical plant, you will make the polymer, and then that will go down, and maybe a small factory can then be melting that polymer and extruding it into this pipes. So you're creating, multiplying jobs, and then you are now exporting to neighboring countries. And the reason why the petrochemical plant is important is because you want to be competitive. Kenya have got a refinery. So if you have only a refinery, that doesn't make you, it doesn't give you competitive advantage. So what will give you competitive advantage is to do something that others don't have. And one thing you can do is to incorporate a petrochemical plant so that you move ahead of your neighbors. Then, although you're landlocked, all of a sudden you have become a key player, maybe the key player in the region. So you can also get, so simply from ethylene, which is the gas that comes out when they are processing, when they are refining. So if you channel that gas into a petrochemical plant, then you get what we call ethylene oxide. You also get polyethylene, which is what you use for the plastic drums, the blue ones. But then you can also get all kinds of things. You can get solvents, you can get ethanol, you can get surfactants there, which are synthetic soaps, detergents, and so on. And then the PVC, which we talked about, which you can see. In fact, one is just behind you, polyvinyl chloride. Now, the reason this is important because we also have a component. The chloride component will come from the source. Now, Equatorial Guinea have got an island called Yoko. And then Marathon Oil, which is an American company, operates a field there. They were wondering what do they do with their natural gas. You can't lay a pipeline from Equatorial Guinea to the US. Impossible. So they did a simple thing, which is a very clever idea. They said, well, we can't move this natural gas to the US. It will cost us a lot to build an LNG plant to liquefy the gas. Therefore, let us build a methanol plant. Methanol is used a lot in the deep water projects. It is also a very powerful solvent. And they then decided to build this methanol plant. It was commissioned in 2001. It consumes 125 million standard cubic feet per day. because they are using natural gas, so that gas is also used to generate the power that runs this plant. And by the way, this is what they call stranded gas. So this gas, they don't know what to do with it, so they just gather it. In some countries, they flare that gas, so you call it stranded gas. So what they have done is to gather this gas, and then they use it to produce this plant. The methanol is chemical grade, therefore you can export it anyway. The production capacity is almost 1 million tons per year, quite a lot. You have an island, which is your lake. This could be a suitable investment. Why do you need an island? You're handling two things that are flammable, highly flammable, natural gas and methanol. So you build this factory in an island to minimize collateral damage. If there is a fire here, then the damage will be minimal. So if you have an island, which is a lake, it's possible to produce methanol from there, from the gas. The investment may be high, but again, it's chemical grade. You can export it. Okay, don't worry, we'll soon finish. Now, I said you could even synergize and get even more for less, which is what value addition is. Value addition simply means you're getting more for less. So this is your primary or petrochemical plant, and this is your chlorine. So you can produce chlorine from your salt by electrolysis of that salt water. Then you get caustic soda, you get chlorine, you get hydrogen. If you combine the two, you get hydrochloric acid. Again, you can export it. But if you bottle the chlorine, then you combine that with ethylene, then you get ethylene chloride. If you polymerize that ethylene chloride, you get polyvinyl chloride, which is PVC, which are the pipelines, these plastic pipes we use for our drainages at home. So imagine that even that one component alone, and you've got the ingredients, you've got the salt, you've got now gas from your petroleum. Fair enough, the chlor-alkali industry is energy intensive, but you have lots of electricity. I'm told you have capacity to produce quite a lot of electricity. So again, with time and resources, with academia like you shaping the policies of the country and say, look, we should invest in this direction because it will give us competitive advantage over the years, then you could invest or attract investment to develop the salt industry and produce your chlorine there, produce your hydrogen there, produce your hydrochloric acid, produce your caustic soda, and then you could then channel that into your petrochemical plant to produce all the raw materials or the intermediates that can be produced from the petrochemical plant. So these are the benefits. If you go for value addition, the petrochemical plant and the refineries will give you more jobs ever than the oil production can give you. And then you can also imagine the offshoots. So smaller industries that are dependent on that. So people will be making the shopping bags from your polyethylene and so on. So the employment generation capacity is huge. And then anything that's a chemical product that meets international specification, you can export. So it's not limited by the fact that oil is made in Africa, no. It meets international standards, therefore you can export that. And then you could become a model for other African countries. And since our problems are similar, if we can solve the problems in one country, then we have a model to replicate in other countries. Now, this is what we call the value addition tree. So it's almost like a tree. If you start with just oil, coal, and so on, you'll be able to produce 101, no, you will produce 10 products. But if you combine that with your chlorine and sodium hydroxide, you will produce 20 products. If you do that, these products will again produce 300 intermediates. And then the tree blossoms, so you have lots of fruits on the tree, can you see? And then you can produce up to 30,000 products. Starting from your oil, your salt, your coal. So that those are the starting materials. potentially we can produce up to 30,000 tons. So it's important we aim at value addition. Now, all of this require change. But how do you change? If we say, oh well, we're a peaceful country, we're happy with where we are, we don't need to change. We'll remain the way we are. But for us to change, we have to raise our standards. We say no. So there are these possibilities. So let's see how we can intensify work, shape the policies of the country, and steer up the lawmakers to say, look, can we begin to save money and channel money in this direction so that we will build for the future as the motto of this great institution. We have to change our limiting beliefs. Instead of saying we cannot, let's say yes we can. It is possible. It may take hard work, but it is possible. Finally, if one strategy is not working, well, you dump it and change it to another one. Why must we stick to one strategy? If it fails us, then we say, well, at least we have learned from our mistakes. This is not taking us to where we want to go. Therefore, we change our strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, I make my submission. Thank you for being patient.
Thank you, Dr. Forward. I must recognize the presence of the Director of Audit Assurance, Dr. Venancio Arrozias, Embatia. We are privileged in this room to have the presence of two former deans of the Faculty of Science. Embatia was formerly the Dean of the Faculty of Science. The Principal was formerly also the Dean of the Faculty of Science. So really they have graced this occasion and we are grateful for that. Dr. Zembadi was involved in bringing the institute and Dr. Ajee to this university. At this juncture, before I call upon all of you to ask questions, let me give you a short opportunity to address this gathering.
Thank you very much. Dr. Indra. Yes, we were together with Dr. Indra when I was in Faculty of Science. He was also Deputy Dean of the First and Faculty. Yeah, it's a great opportunity to be here and also have listened to Dr. Ajee, who has really enlightened us in lots of ways about this industry of petroleum that we are very passionate about. And the moment being such an opportune one, that discussions are very high level. These days, everyone knows what's going on in Parliament. And then here at Makerere, where we are really in the process of developing new programs in petroleum. There is a program for the undergraduate students that I know many students here are part of already, but then also that there is a program, the pipeline, that is going to be at the level of graduate studies. Now, at the same, in the same vein, there are other preparations. You know, there is an institute of petroleum in Chigumba that the government has set up. I saw from your submissions that you talk about integrated petroleum studies, and this institute also prepares students at various levels. And at the beginning of it, it's preparing students for certificates and awards at diploma level, especially now we are really looking at skills. We are privileged to be part of the preparation there as well. And this institute has now been recognized by the National Council for Education. And we, in Senate, here at Makerere University, we proposed to have an affiliation. Of course, there was an application for the institute to be affiliated to Makerere University, but also at the same time with the process that Makerere University is going through to make sure that this institute gets the appropriate affiliation. So I believe that that is in line with what you propose, that you have this integrated resource outside universities, but at the same time you have an interface with the university at the provision of human resource at training level. And there are lots of lessons that we tend to derive from as we prepare for this industry of human resource. We derive from already our big brothers, especially in the country, Nigeria, with the resource of PPP, GDP per capita, purchasing power parity, about 300 plus billion dollars. And of course, that's about 10 times that in Uganda. And of course, there was some enlightenment when you mentioned that this specific example that you drew really got me enticed, because I was looking at what strategies would be in place to recoup this big investment. I mean, you're talking about $3.5 billion sunk in there, and at a flow rate of about $100,000 billion.
Because it will take care of my electrical engineer firm. So I was born in probably one of the smallest villages in central Nigeria. I studied applied chemistry at an undergraduate level. And prior to that, I have worked in a glass company. In my academic work, I found mathematics and physics to be easiest. But I didn't want to study them because I said if I did, I would end up teaching. And I had seen the application of chemistry in industry, so I said, well, let me go and study chemistry, applied chemistry or chemical engineering. I graduated in 1986 with a first class honors. In 1992, I won a scholarship, Commonwealth scholarship to go to the University of Strathclyde. It's a technical university to study chemical technology. I did a 1-year MPhil, and then my professor was happy with my work. He got a scholarship for me to do a PhD. Now, my PhD was on electrical engineering, high voltage switchgears. But because I was a British Council scholar, at that time in Scotland, the British Council had this clever idea. And this is good because it will tell us how Uzumbus think. So they would look around their sponsors, the students they have sponsored. And then for whatever reason, they will identify some and pick them and attach them to industries. And the idea was that if that industry wanted to invest in the students' home country, they already have a contact. So this is useful because it tells us how they think hard. So in between my PhD and my MPhil, I was one of those that were selected to go and work for a company in Aberdeen. I went to Aberdeen the first time in 1993. And then I went and I worked with them in 2004. Sorry, 1994. But I had already gotten this scholarship. So my professor asked, kept the scholarship on board. And then he told me, he said, you go for that program. It will help you in future. So when I went for the program, these people, the highest, most educated person had a HND. I said, oh my God, how can people be making money out of chemistry when they don't know as much chemistry as myself? Now, that cheered me up. So it changed my mentality. I said, well, now I will devote my attention to gaining understanding of this oil industry in short. And so after my PhD, I worked in the university, and then in between that, I was also consulting for the oil industry. And then I went back full-time work in the oil industry in 1999. And then I learned as much as possible. And that is my journey. And in between, knowing that I didn't have the privilege to undertake undergraduate program in oil and gas, so I have to do a lot of self-studying and making up by attending strategic courses. And the key is being willing to learn and then catch up. It doesn't make you an expert in all areas, but it makes you an expert in one area, which is what the industry is about. Nobody is an expert in all the areas. But the key is to have an appreciation of everything that goes on there. And always be thinking, how is what I'm seeing now? How does what I'm learning now relate back to the problems we have in Africa? So it has to do with the passion you also have for where you come from. So that is my journey. Now, linked to the question the engineer asked, I think even in Nigeria we have unemployment problems. But probably it's slightly different because we have refineries, we have petrochemicals, we have other industries. So people can easily switch and see how they can improve on their skills and begin to do some other things, and not necessarily related to their training. And then hopefully with time they will catch up. But even in Nigeria, you have unemployment problems. I think the key is to be flexible and willing to adapt. Even in the UK where we are, you have lots of unemployment. In a country like Spain, you have over 20% unemployment rate. So the key is for us to be creative and say, well, in the circumstance I'm in, can I think and hopefully God will give me a simple idea that I can work on, and then it will change my circumstance. Now, in terms of the, did you mention about refinery? The delay. I think it's difficult for me to comment on that. I believe that the key is for this country to know what they want and then insist on what they want. It may not be a confrontational approach, but I'm sure this country has the skills to be able to negotiate in a tactful manner and still get what they want from the people that they want to fund the finance or whatever. I don't know what excuses the funders may be coming up with, but at the end of the day, I had the opportunity to hear the president speak, His Excellency, President of this country. And he said, some years ago, he said, well, this oil has been here since our ancestors. So, if anybody wants to develop this oil, they have to develop it on our own terms, which in a way shows that there is a commitment to develop the industry along the lines of national objectives. But I'm not the expert to say on that one because I have not been following on what's going on. And even if I have, I think it's difficult to comment without having all the whole picture. Yes. Have I covered all of them? I think I have. Thank you.
I hope he has covered all the questions. Any more questions?
We incorporated the elements of environment in the discussion when we said HSC, health, safety, and environment. So that was incorporated. Now the mechanism of oil formation is itself a large topic, but in general it is understood that organic matter over billions of years was compressed and sandwiched between two layers of rocks, and then that organic matter under the influence of temperature and pressure finally got transformed into oil as it is. And that oil is trapped often in rock beds. So although you may say the oil is under the surface, but it's trapped between layers of rocks. So that's the simple explanation. But of course, Dr. John is the best person to explain that to you. Oil is never a cause. What God gives us is not a cause. How we use it can give the impression that it is a cause. I don't know whether there are any issues with oil exploitation here, but I think the key feature is that there should be clear communication. People need to be aware, and it's part of the awareness that has resulted in this lecture that we're having at this moment, to raise the awareness of people. Now, I believe that with all the discussions that are going on and the debate, they are a good thing. It shows that democracy is lively. I think the key thing is to be able to incorporate the yearnings of people in these discussions in the policies that will take the country forward. At the same time, I also believe that there is need to also look at where we are and where we want to go, so that we don't dissipate all of our energy looking back at what has been done, instead of looking at where we are now and how can we make the future better. I don't understand everything, all that is going on, but I think we need to listen objectively and then assess things ourselves, and also believe that there is a greater future for everyone, and work towards ensuring that the future is in the overall interest of Uganda. I think it's difficult to comment on something that I have not all the facts. And even if I have the facts, well, am I the best person to comment on? Yes, but I think the key thing is we look at all the issues, and if there are areas that need to be corrected, well, we point that out, and then hopefully they are taken on board, and we move forward and look into the future and say, well, for future activities, have the contributions we have proposed been carried along. And so I think that's the way forward in my own.
I think Dr. J is understandably trying to steer clear of politics. I would do if I...
The last one. My contribution in Nigeria is mainly from an academic point of view. Just like I'm here, so I lecture in institutions. I also am a resource person at the annual conferences of the Society of Petroleum Engineers in Nigeria. I speak internationally in conferences similar to this one being organized by INT. I also provide technical consultancy services to businesses in the oil and gas industry in Nigeria. So those are my contributions. As for why I went for education in the UK, first of all, I didn't go to the UK to go and study oil and gas. Maybe, I hope, yeah. So my involvement in oil and gas was probably more of a chance activity. So that was not what I set out to go and study over there. But the university I went, I liked the structure, whereby everything was applied orientated. You're trained to apply this knowledge to solve problems. So my interest and training was in the area of problem solving. So when I saw opportunity to solve problems in the oil and gas industry, I then channeled my interest in the area of the oil and gas industry. Now, I think it's fair to say that even though Nigeria, like Uganda, I believe we inherited a system of education. I don't know about here, but the standard of education in some other African countries are not the same. It's not the same as say in the 60s, 70s, or 80s. So there has been some level of depreciation, and it's good to go outside to gain exposure, to see how things are, because we tend to be static, whereas in developed countries, their educational system is continually evolving and taking into consideration changes. And so the books you use, the journals you consult, we tend to refer to more up-to-date journals because they are available. And indeed, that's part of the problem of education in Africa, whereby access to relevant and current journals are quite limited. So there's still a role for us, if we can, to go outside and gain experience and gain another dimension of education and see how we can bring it and feed back into Africa. But of course, the other option is the one we propose to say the universities such as this can establish linkages whereby you bring people, whether they are Africans, whether they are non-Africans, and then have a benefit from their experiences. That is actually good because that experience can be shared with a larger number of students as opposed to maybe this university being able to afford to send only 10 or 20 or 30 students to go and study abroad. So that is my view on that. I think the other question was about any experience in Nigeria.
No, best practice.
Best practice. Yeah, I think best practices are always there, but whether they are properly formulated and above all, whether they are implemented. Because often the problem is not so much whether there is absence of business code of conduct. Yes, I believe every serious business will have a business code of conduct. The question is, are those codes of conduct strictly adhered to? Now, I cannot answer that question for any organization. If I have a company, then I have the responsibility to make sure that those codes of conduct are adhered to. Now, if it's a public organization, well, maybe you want to find out what are those codes of conduct. Have they been adhered to? Have you got evidence to show that they are not adhered to? Yes, are there channels of being able to make complaints and say, well, this is at variance with what your code of conduct says. So things like that. So, but I would say every organization will have a code of ethics for practicing their business, certainly in the oil and gas industry. Yes. So have I covered all the questions? Oh, which one have I left out?
Yeah, appropriate approach to Uganda.
Oh, okay. Now, I think we need to get this in context. You can have books written on production sharing agreement. Now, all of this is about negotiation. So, you have to decide what you consider as fair for you. So, I don't know what is fair for Uganda. Yes, and these are legal things. I think anyone attempting to guess is dabbling into an area they are not competent in, unless they are lawyers, unless they are the fellow lawyers. So what I have given is just these are principles, but the details of the contract will have to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. Now, the basis upon which any contract is signed is purely dependent on what the level of understanding of the parties at the time of signing the contract, what each party aims to get from that contract. So it's difficult to say there is a bad contract or a good one. So it all depends on what are we seeking to get at the time we are signing the contract. Yes, what do we perceive as good for us? Yes, so I think it's a difficult area to comment on. Although as an onlooker, you may think, oh, well, it's a straightforward thing. But I think it's not as straightforward as that. Okay.
And the secrecy, the implication of secrecy is sharing to some of these clauses.
Well, again, I don't know the terms and conditions of the contract. If at the time of signing the contract, both parties agree that some clauses will remain confidential, well, that's what they have agreed to. Now, is that good or bad? I don't know. Because if I and you enter a contract and we sign and say, well, but this is between me and you, and there are implications that you shouldn't violate by divulging some information, well, technically, Now, we could argue and say, well, is that right? But keep that aside and look at it purely from a legal point of view. The legality is that what both of you have agreed that these are the terms of the contract to be respected. Now, somebody may have a different view to that, but if that is what is agreed on, that's what is agreed. Is that okay? Okay.
I'm sure you cannot answer all the questions today.